So I'm called Charity Kalebbo Ahimbisibwe. I'm the Executive Director at the Electoral Laws and Governance Institute. It's an institute that is an affiliate to Electoral Laws and Governance Institute of Kenya. I started it after having been in election observation for more than 7 years, working with different organizations in Uganda. And my love for elections has not left me the same. I'm a journalist, but also a lawyer by training now, because I had to understand all about governance and electoral democracy. I have also recently done diplomacy in governance and elections at the American Embassy together with the Lincoln Institute of Strategic Studies in the United States. So that is me. My interest in this area is that we would have data to drive good governance, especially for women, also for men, yes, the whole gender perspective, because the quality of leaders has increasingly deteriorated. We have people who are coming on the scene to look for personal interests, not necessarily work for the citizens of Uganda. So what I have seen is that our electoral processes have deteriorated. Elections are governed by principles. The first principle is freeness. And freeness is so much hinged on the freedom of expression. And then we have fairness. An election is supposed to be free, fair, credible. If you read Article 61 of the Constitution, it enjoins the Electoral Commission to ensure that elections are free, fair, credible. Why? Freeness is to freedom of expression, that people can freely express themselves, people can freely exchange ideas. Fairness, that all political actors will be able to participate in the electoral process. That it doesn't matter which political party you come from, you should feel free to participate and to associate with people. Now, association, as you know it in Article 29 on freedom of expression, it works sufficiently for freeness of the election. How have you associated? Who do you associate with? Are your opinions counting? Do people value them or they don't value them? So those are the things that we look out for, the tenets that determine a good election. And now credibility. Credibility is the whole question of transparency. Is the process transparent for everyone that is participating in elections? Do they have the information? For example, do we know how many women's slots were there for special interest group elections? Because every year, some of these slots for these elections increase. And so if you do not know that there are 270 positions for elders, how will you then participate in that electoral college? Because it's an electoral college system which starts from the village level. If you missed the village, you cannot join at sub-county. If you missed at sub-county, you cannot join at district level. It is consistent. It moves from village through to the district level and then the national conference. Now, you also have to understand how that electoral college system works, and that is how we have had most of our youth eliminated from the electoral process. Women and female youth, we have about 0.02% of female who are participating in the youth election. Why? For lack of information. Yeah, so briefly, I can probably say that and then holistically say that the numbers of women look like they increased with the number of districts, because the Constitution in Article 78A provides that every district will produce a woman member of parliament. We have 146 districts in Uganda. That translates to 146 women members of parliament. So you would think that the number is big. But if you look at the holistic number, it's not big. The men are 353, the outgoing parliament. There are 353 men. Women are 176, which translates into 67% for the male and 33% for the female. Now that tells you the disparity now. So you can see that still, even with the affirmative action that the Constitution is providing for, and that is taking place with every election, the numbers of women have not actually sufficiently increased. When we talk about issues of equity, equality, we have talked about it for some time, that men and women should be equal in all spaces and should have equal representation. And there is kind of a shift on the equality gear. But equity, there is no shift on the equity gear. Why? Because equity is a question of the injustice women have suffered over the period of years. So for a long time, women were relegated to a backseat. And they've continued to be relegated to a backseat. If you look at the SEC elections that just happened for the National Resistance Movement, there are only 2 women in SEC. The National Representative for Women League, who is Virungi, and the Honorable Anita Annette Among, the second vice chairperson. Just 2 women. The rest are men. The men, the number is 10. So the men are 8. So you can see that there is a differential. And then for all the other leagues, because you see they have regional leagues, for all the other leagues, it is 1 woman. The rest are men. And all of them, it's 10, 10, 10, 10. So the representation has not sufficiently grown. Women have also stuck to only the affirmative action. I'll tell you that the Honorable Rebecca Kadaga has stood as woman MP for Kamuli from 1986. She sticks on the affirmative action seat, which is woman representative. She has not graduated to go to the constituency MP, but what the Constitution had envisaged to deal with the question of equity and equality at the same time was that after you have served for a period of 2 terms on the affirmative action seat, which meaning the seat that was created for women, that is the affirmative action seat. After you've served for 2 terms, you should be able to move and compete with the men in the full constituency, because women are not limited not to participate there. But every time they've gone there, and these are now the sentiments that the public has produced for the women that have gone for the constituency seat. You're not a man. Why are you coming for the constituency seat? Go for the woman MP seat. You want to think you're more important than men. You cannot win. They have struggled, and the whole idea is to try and make the whole gender understand that this seat, the constituency assembly seat, okay, the constituency MP seat, which has 353 people, is not confined to the men. It can have women competing for it. And we have, in the last parliament, we have 6 women who came on the full constituency seat. One of them being Dr. Ayo from Oyam district. She came on UPC ticket, stood as a full constituency MP, and there she is. But the other thing that women have struggled with is the question of financing. The money to pay to get a ticket has been a big impediment to women. One, the question of financial muscle for women is always a disadvantage. Women somehow will not get a lot of money. Why? They have a lot of responsibility. We were just talking about the gender perspective even before we started the program. That a woman has to be at home, she has to cook, she has to look after her children, and yet she also has to find time to work. So she has to balance all these things. So half the time, half the opportunities that would happen in the evening. Like, for example, I have very many evening meetings that should take place with donors. And in donor spaces, having dinners with them at embassies. They create these spaces. But I find myself not being able to attend most of those meetings. I attend like 1 or 2, and I can't attend all the others. And yet the male gender, all my colleagues, they all attend those meetings. And from those meetings, they get sponsorship. And from the sponsorship, they're able to do a lot of work. They have financial muscle. Now, my financial muscle then is limited by only what I have selected. And sometimes even what I have selected may not come through. So you see, those are the limitations for women, that the woman may not have the same amount of time to spend looking for money because of the gender demands on her, the gendered roles that she has to play. Now, the man has more leeway to find that money. So men basically have more finances than women. So when you say that for you to stand for political office, the NRM, I think, asked for 3 million for every woman candidate. That money was prohibitive to very many women. And those who managed to pay and participated in the primary and failed are not coming back as independents. And yet their male counterparts are coming as independents. Why? Because they don't have any more money. They had hoped, they invest the 3 million, then the political party takes them on to participate, and they come as the flag bearers for the political party. But now they went into the election, they had already spent their 3 million, they didn't make it, and now they have postponed their desires to 2031. I know 6 of such women. Now, what that speaks to is that there must be a mechanism in which women should deliberately be encouraged to participate for political leadership. But also there should be mechanisms of making sure that when these financial thresholds are being determined by political parties, some political parties have not asked for money, but UPC has also asked for 1 million, and for them it is blanket, men and women, 1 million. But if you think of the women in the rural areas, they also want to stand, but they can't afford this 1 million. Even young women, majority young women, the ones that I found said, I've just come out of the university, I really wanted to stand, but where do I get the money? But even women like myself, you will find that you don't have that 3 million to put aside. 3 million, you're going to put it into an election and you're not sure about it, you don't have it. So you will not participate, not because you don't want, but because you did not access the money. But if there was maybe a basket fund for women participation, or if we continually have women encouraged to participate in these programs like GROW, and we have more financial literacy happening for women, and more spaces where women can do money even when they are near their children, I think that would improve on the question of participation. The other aspect that has affected participation for women in political spaces has been the question of information. I said that I thought I wanted to run down some statistics for you on that to show you clearly. On the internet, majority of the people who access information on the internet are male. The females are accessing information on the internet at 23%. The men are at 88%. Because they have no access to money to buy data, they also have no access to phones. In the rural areas, the women who have phones have capability. They don't have smartphones. And to go on the internet, you need a smartphone. Now, even the few who move out of their space and go to access the smartphone on their friends' phones, they suffer what we call domestic violence, because their husbands are always saying, what are you looking for on those spaces? So the question of access to information breeds 2 things. There is the question of violence on the women being prohibited by their husbands, but also the methods of election are making it harder for them, like the ones that participated in the NRM primaries and had to line up. You imagine, Ruth, that your relatives have not lined up behind you, and your friends are the ones who lined up behind you, and you've been cooking for them every day, giving them food, but they lined up on your opponent's line. How would you feel now when you go back home? So you saw them on the other line. Will you still be enthused to work with them, or you'll think of them as traitors? So there's been a lot of division that happened with the question of lining up, but the political party has defended itself that it's one method that they feel they want to use. But it's the same thing like a reverend or a pastor. If our reverend is one, mine and yours, and he stands on my line against your line, do you feel you want to go back to that church? Because you also felt that he selected someone else over you. So those are the sentiments that have come through with even the method of electing women in rural areas. Then the question of violence, because violence has been precipitated by the question of why did that man vote for you? That man is not my friend. Why did he come on your line? Or that drunkard or what? And you simply went to search for votes. And we also have men curtailing women not to participate. They just tell them simply, I don't want you to go into a political office because the children, the home will be affected. So we have less women who can then present themselves for political office. I'll tell you that in 2021, these are the statistics I've been telling my friend that I wanted to read out for you. We had them across the country. I wanted you to see a holistic picture of how men and women were elected in different districts across Uganda in 2021. Of course, we haven't done 2026 yet. We'll only do it at the end of the election. That's when we can be able to have data from across the country showing you the various districts. We are doing it right now for the NRM because they've done the primaries election, so we can be able to tell you for definite how many women have been elected genuinely, even on the general MP slot, but also on the women MP slot. Most of them came on the female MP slot. So
that data is generated by your organization?
Yes, by the Electoral Laws and Governance Institute. So in Acholi region in 2021, the females who were elected were 10, the males were 18. In Bukedi, those who were elected were, these regions were 12. I'm trying to look at, okay, in Bukedi, it was 8 women, 21 men. In Bunyoro, 12 women, 16 men. In Busoga, 12 women, 32 men. In West Ankole, 9 women, 21 men. In East Ankole, 9 women, 30 men. In East Buganda, 5 women, 10 men. In there's a region here, Elgon, 10 women, 23 men. In Karamoja, 9 women, 17 men. In Chigezi, 7 women, 13 men. In which is this one? That one I failed to see it. But Lango, 12 women, 19 men. In South Buganda, 5 women, 12 men. Renzori, 12 women, 19 men. In North Buganda, 13 women, 19 men. So you can see for yourself that the numbers don't lie. In Teso, 11 women, 24 men. I gave you West Ankole, I think. Or I gave you East Ankole. I gave you East Ankole. So West Ankole, 5 women, 13 men. West Buganda, 7 women, 15 men. West Nile, 14 women, 25 men. So you see, the numbers are not telling us lies. So when you look at the statistics holistically, then you see that altogether the women who were elected in the various positions were 176, but the men were 353, like I had earlier on told you. And this data was broken down in the regions. So from these disparities, it goes to tell us that there is an issue that is happening that needs us to carefully purge participation of women. So it is the question of voter education, Ruth, that you're asking me about. There is always limited information towards elections and electoral processes. And the judges from 2001 have had rulings. The court ruling of 2001 between Kizza Besigye and Yoweri Museveni did outline the question of voter education. And I said, you see, until when you educate people on what are the available slots for them, like in the PWD college, electoral college, because that is an electoral college system. The electoral college system has about 4 elections. 1 are the elderly, 2 are the youth, 3 are the workers, and then people with disabilities. But even in the workers MP slot, you will see that the workers MPs that we get are men. And then throughout the districts, the labor officers and the people who are responsible for the issues of work are largely men, except for where there is an affirmative seat, where we know that there is female representation. There's supposed to be female representation. Then women are brought on board, and this is how it happens. Once the election is taking place, they go to the village and say, you, Ruth, you've been very active. There is a place here for a female to represent people in the election of workers. Why don't you stand? That's it. They've given you information there and then. They've selected you. They've taken you. You've got the position. Now, there might be a charity who was there, who was interested, but she just didn't know that it was happening. Yes. So until the question of voter education happens, how many slots do we have at district level for youth representation, which you're asking about, for the female youth? Because they are there. At village level, we have 2. At sub-county, we have 2. Now that I'm talking about the affirmative action seat. But it doesn't mean that they cannot also participate for the main representation. They can. But they have been relegated to only the affirmative action seat. Now, when we leave the sub-county, we go to the county, and from the county, we move to the district. At the district, we have female representation across all districts. We have a female councillor in all districts of Uganda. So we have 146 districts, and each of them has a female councillor who sits within that council, because they have a council that sits a speaker and a deputy speaker to deliberate on issues about the district. And that council is chaired by the LC5 chairperson. Now, LC5 chairpersons are not only supposed to be men. And yet for all the districts that we have, the 146 districts that I've talked about, only 4 women have managed to stand as LC5 chairpersons. The one from Bunyoro told a very interesting story. Actually, Toro in Hoima. She said when she stood, her boss had passed on. So she stood in that slot to come as the LC5 chairperson. And the men asked her, when did you become a man that you now want to take up this position? That is our place. And she said, no, but I have served as a deputy. For the one that has gone, I know how the process has been running. I know how we have administratively handled the issues. Why are you stopping me? Then other men said, actually, there is no reason why we are stopping this woman from becoming the LC5 chairperson. Then they said, instead of calling it chairman, she cannot be chairman. She's not a man. She's a woman. So we are now going to call it chairperson. So maybe the naming of LC5 chairperson should remain person and not man. That we can also do considerations for to encourage the gender participation.
There's something that one of our, we interviewed Charity Lenia. She came in for the direct position for Gura. And then we interviewed this lady from Soka. And she said when she went to electoral commission, when she went to pick the form, the officer kept refusing to give them to her.
For LC5 chairman.
No, for direct seat.
Oh, constituency.
Yes, they told her, no, you can't take them. And it ended up into a lot of verbal exchange, and she was in turn educating the electoral officer that, just being that it has been consistently filled by men
does not mean
it's designated for men.
Which is true.
And then they had to send her back, and she came back the next day with older people who explained to the electoral officer that this position is open to either gender. And the lady had refused, and then finally she gave her the form. So I think there's also an information gap within the electoral commission.
Yes, the officials within the electoral commission, most of them do not have a lot of information. They lack the information, and I don't know why the electoral commission doesn't take it up. And they say they always do training, but I think that this training is not sufficient for their electoral observer. For their election, for their commission. And that has also created mistrust from the voters, but also mistrust from the participants. Because you see, for you to trust in the process, you should have sufficient information, but you should also be able to access the services the same way I access them. If we don't access them the same way, then you cannot trust the process. Then there is lack of transparency in the process. You're thinking somebody is keeping some information for some people who are more important than yourself. And that is wrong, because now that contravenes Article 61, which mandates them to ensure that the process is free, fair, and credible. And I explained what the three aspects of free, fair, credible. Of course, online violence, especially cyberbullying, does discourage them from participating. Many times what happens is they attack the women personally about personal issues. They will attack you about whether you have a husband or you don't have a husband. They will say every time women go online, they will either talk about your big nose, your ugly mouth, she doesn't look beautiful, she has no man. They will bring all these flimsy issues and never look at the agenda the woman has set. And that is an issue. Even in the SEC elections, if you notice, there was a question of smearing Vaseline and the question of bleach. I cannot vote bleach. That came through. What would bring that? It is a gender aspect. Let's not lose tide of these things when we see them happening. Now, people need to be empowered to understand that a woman is as good as a man. They also need to understand that these issues of gender are society issues that have existed for a period of time. The roles that we were given are gendered roles that we found in existence. We are not breaking them, but we are just saying that women also need to be empowered to work within their space and to also take a lead in leadership. So I think there's a lot of need for leadership training. There are gaps on political party trainings as well, electoral commission trainings, because even in political parties, all the 27 political parties that have fielded candidates, we don't have a woman a candidate who is coming through the political party as the president. Name all political parties. ANT has a man, NUP has a man, NRM has a man, DP has a man. Let's go PFF. They are still thinking, but there are two names of men who have been fronted. One, the Lord Mayor, and then there is another. They had said, Dr. Kizza Besigye, he said, no, as a founding father, you will not stand. But they fronted a second man. I don't remember if it is not the MP of Chira. So you can see that even for the Mugati Gwabata, he recently came up with the political party called Eating Pidao, and it's still a man that is coming through. Even PLU, when PLU was created, still it is men who are taking the lead. So that tells you something. It tells you that they are not comfortable enough to think that a woman can take that position, which is a wrong perspective. And I am saying that we We still need to do enlightenment. We need to continually talk about these issues. We need to produce evidence and present it continually. When the president named Justice Francis Abodo as the new principal judge, we've never had a principal judge who is a woman. She's going to be the first principal judge as a woman. Just the same way he named a first vice president as a woman, who was Speciosa Wandirakazibwe. At the time he did it, people said, who is Wandirakazibwe, until they pulled her down. You know, they worked behind the scenes until she was out. But he continued naming other women as vice president. And now he has named a principal judge. And I saw women also attack her, and I was saying, no, this is wrong, because women should be celebrating her, that then we will get him to continue appointing more women as principal judge, because our principal judge supervises the High Court and all the magistrate courts. That is a large chain of courts to supervise. There is a lot of power there. And so when we take those positions, then it's like the president is saying, yeah, I think women, yes, women can actually do these things. We might have a prime minister whom they have criticized as much as they have, and they've said so many things, but she's still a woman.
And she's still there.
And she's there. Yes, so the more he appoints them in these positions, then the more we are lucky to know that we can participate. So there is need for continuous education in the political parties, because that's where I came from. And we have clearly seen that in the political parties, women will either come as Secretary General, or sometimes they will not even be Secretary General. They will be assistant something. For the small positions, they will be lead of the Women League. They will be there, but they will not be the head of the political party. And they will not be, even Betty Olive Kamia, she had a political party called the Farmers something. And that political party, when she left to join government, went to bed with a man. And up to now, it is there struggling, but it has a... So in election monitoring, one, I should say it is difficult to be an election observer when you're a woman. Why? Because the engagement is a public engagement. Elections are public affairs. They are political affairs. Now you have to comment about political issues. And you have to stay out late night. I don't know how many times I've been called to UBC behind the headlines. It ends at 2 a.m. So you start the show about 11 p.m. and you finish at about 12:30 p.m. But by the time you drive from town to your house, it's 2 a.m. That's a gone night, and in the morning you're hurrying for your next schedules, which you'd already set up. So it is not an easy space to work in. And then when it is time for collecting data, when they are counting votes and you're going to sit at the tally center, you will sit to the tally center up to 4 a.m. You saw the president in the SEC elections. He left SEC at 4 a.m. What is it that would make a president leave at 4 a.m.? It's the counting process. It is a long process. So you follow the ballot right from the time it was dropped in a ballot box at 7 a.m. on the voting day. And you follow it through to the tally centers. You will never sleep, because you want that data and you want it when it is accurate. So this whole period when those elections are taking place, you can't be near your family. You know what that means as a woman. So it's a very difficult job to do, I must say. That being in election observation, collecting data, analyzing data, putting it out to the public, explaining it, is not exactly a place you think is ordinary for an ordinary woman. It takes a lot of passion, it takes commitment, but it also takes a lot of education. You have to educate yourself on all these things, on what are the key tenets for a good election, how do you observe, how do you collect data, how do you analyze that data to get it to be. So an elections observer, once the election has been announced, we interest ourselves in the process from the pre-election process, the during the election process, and the post-election process. Now, when we talk of pre-election, it is the period before going to the elections. So this period when we did the national voter update process, the period when we did the special interest group elections, the period when we have had the reorganizing of polling stations, the period when we have had the political parties registering, and the period when we have had now the MPs beginning to be nominated and the president being nominated. All that is the pre-election period. Now, when you're looking at the pre-election period, you interest yourself in looking at the law vis-a-vis what Electoral Commission is doing, because the Electoral Commission produced what we called the Electoral Roadmap. Now, the roadmap is what you base on to look at the milestones. They said they will update within this period. Is it what they did? You've noticed that during this pre-election period, they've changed a lot of that roadmap. They keep saying we have adjusted, we have changed. No date, this date for election has changed. The place where we're electing from has changed. The number of polling stations here has increased. The number of voters here has increased. So as an observer, you take note of all those things. Now you also collect the data. Now we're still doing analysis on the reorganizing of polling stations because the country is big. Every constituency almost has like 700, 800 polling stations. And at every polling station, you have almost 1,000 people. So you have to look at that data. It is a mass sea of data. You have to come up with methods of how do we analyze this data and make sense of it to speak to it, not necessarily provide it in the raw format in which it is. So that is the life of an observer in the pre-election period. Now, during the election is also broken down into a number of activities of that day. Number one, the time of arrival of the ballot boxes at the polling stations. But also, you will interest yourself with the dispatch of polling materials. They are dispatched usually at 2 a.m. to move them to the various polling stations from the warehouse. And the warehouse is in Banda. So you have to go to the warehouse in Banda and see how those polling materials are being dispatched. Are they well sealed? And where are they going? To the different locations where they are going. Now you should also have other observers in the other places, like across the whole country, where these materials are going, to receive the materials as you saw them being dispatched from Banda. Now, you should also be stationed at every one single polling station. You should have somebody stationed there. And there are 42,000 polling stations. Of course, it's difficult to have 42,000 observers who are trained and they understand what data they are looking for on elections. So what we normally do is come up with a sample. If it is 42,000 polling stations, we decide on 200 polling stations, or we decide on 1,000 polling stations. We do a sample that we think will be representative, and we scientifically buffer it by saying, if you are a human being and you're suffering from malaria, they only take a small sample of blood from you to know that you have malaria. They don't take all the blood from you. So we use the same methodology to justify how our sample will speak to all the 42,000 polling stations. So the polling station will interest ourselves if the voters arrive, the original voters that are supposed to see the seal broken. Were they there to see that the ballots are clear? Did they overturn the box before they started voting, or they didn't? Because if they didn't, then we can assume there were ballots inside that ballot box. And then, of course, we also take note of, is indelible ink available? And then we start to observe the process as people start to come in. The first voter should be on the line by 7 a.m. The last voter should be on the line by 4 p.m. Now, the ones that come beyond 4 p.m., have they been allowed to vote or they were denied to vote? If you come beyond 4 p.m., the law says you cannot. So if they stop you, it's not wrong. Us as observers will not take it as an issue. But if it turns 4 p.m. and the line is still so long, they still have to allow those people to vote because they had been standing on the line anyway before it turned. So if it turns 4 p.m. and let's say an electoral official does not know that it is mandatory to let these ones who are lining up to vote and they are sent away, it becomes a big issue for us as observers. So we must stay until all the lines are done, and we must read the DR forms, and we must ensure that we saw the agents for each political party. So if there are 29 political parties, we want to see 29 political party agents. And we also want to see that all the 29 political party agents signed off the DR form saying we agree to the results that are coming from this polling station. If it doesn't happen, then it's an issue for us. We will raise an issue. Why is this party agent not agreeing to sign? Because signing is consent. If you don't consent, then there's a reason why you're not consenting. And then from that point, once the results are being transmitted to the district level, we move to the district tally center. District tally center receives all the results within that district. But the constituencies are usually more than just one. In a district, you can have 2 or 3 constituencies. Now, we'll be interested to know what ballots came from each of the polling stations in each constituency, and if it tallies with what we found out at those constituencies where we were. And during the day, of course, we observe to see, is there military? We observe to see, is there anyone who was beaten? Is there anyone who was denied a chance to vote? Those things interest us because it is the right of every citizen who has turned 18 years to vote. So it is a rigorous process. That is how it moves now at the tally center. Once you're at the tally center, you wait for the counting. You will count results. Sometimes you'll count results for 2 days, but usually, ideally, it should be 1 day. For the president, it is 48 hours. That's what the law requires. So we cannot have the presidential results being announced after 2 days. No, we should know them the next day in the evening. That is the law. So you will stay until when all results are counted. Should you leave and anything happens, it means that your data is faulty. So you cannot leave until everything is done at every tally center. One of the key issues that I have is that this time round there is no joint observation by civil society organizations, and so it's going to affect the data that will be produced. What we're going to speak to will be snippets of the process because of lack of funding. Secondly, also because the Electoral Commission did what we call selective accreditation. There are some people who are accredited, there are those who are not. To come together as about 400 or 500 civil society organizations, and because our organizations are country-based, we would select members from across the country to help us with the process. As you've seen from what I have explained, it is a huge process and requires a lot of people, and all those people must be trained. All those people must be given equipment. They need phones, they need paper, they need pens. The phones to transmit the data in real time to us at the data tally centers. We usually have tally centers where we collect our data from to do analysis from. Now in 2021, Electoral Commission did not allow the tally centers to run because they said we wanted to announce results that were contrary to what they were announcing, which is not true. The world over, election observers collect data, they analyze data, and they produce it for citizens to be able to choose what information they want to take, and also to give a fair representation of how the process turned out. And this data helps during petitions, presidential petitions. Why are presidential petitions important? They promote democracy because our processes are such that if you're disgruntled, you go to court to seek redress. Now, as it turns out for 2026, with limited observation and probably no data that will be sufficiently produced apart from data which will be analyzed on maybe the National Voter Register and the polling stations, and maybe a few polling stations during the election itself. It means that the courts will have a problem of substantiating evidence, and as to whether the democracy grows or stagnates is going to be a big issue after 2026. So beyond 2026, the question of data and lack of proper observation is going to affect the elections further. Maybe one thing that we need to know is that Article 17 of the Constitution talks about the duties of a Ugandan citizen. And 17E says every Ugandan should be able to defend Uganda. 17I says every Ugandan should work against corruption or corrupt tendencies. Bribery is corruption. Don't allow bribery. If you see it as a citizen, take note of it, make noise about it on social media. Also, as a citizen, pay attention to your polling stations. Who are the people who are voting? There are some people who died in the process even after the update process happened. It's only the villagers who can know. If you go to the ballot and you discover that on the register those people were also ticked, then raise an alarm. It is up to you as a Ugandan to defend your own democracy. Elections are here just to help us to know how we can elect credible, valuable, and principled leaders. If we don't have elections, the only way to get leaders will be through the gun, which we rejected as a country when we promulgated the 1995 Constitution, because the preamble says that on realizing that we had a lot of bloodshed, we decided on elections as a process through which we shall elect leaders who represent us. So the elections are very important processes, and I encourage every Ugandan to participate.